Welcome to Deep Dive English. If you've landed here on our YouTube channel, chances are you're curious about Henry Kissinger's, well, monumental work, World Order. The full title is Reflections on the Character of Nations and the Future of International Stability.
It's quite a title and quite a book.
Exactly. And maybe you've wanted to read it, but let's be honest. Who has the time for several hundred pages on geopolitics when life is just busy?
It's a dense read for sure. Very rewarding, but definitely a commitment.
That's precisely why we're here today. Think of this as your shortcut, your comprehensive, but hopefully digestible guide to the core insights of this really essential book.
Yeah, we're aiming to sort of unpack his main arguments, pull out the key ideas.
Right. Our mission is to navigate Kissinger's intricate thinking, grab those important nuggets of knowledge, maybe explore some surprising facts along the way, and help you grasp his ideas. We want to do it in an interesting, informal, easy-to-understand way.
And we're planning to cover the whole sweep of the book, really, from the historical foundations right up to the present day and future challenges.
You'll get a solid understanding of how different civilizations have thought about and tried to achieve order throughout history. Ancient empires, modern tech, it's all in there.
So get ready to hopefully get well informed and maybe have a few aha moments about how nations operate and what shapes global stability.
Okay, so let's dive right in. Kissinger's World Order. It's not just a history book, is it? It feels much deeper than that.
Oh, absolutely. It's really a profound inquiry into the deep-seated beliefs, the kind of historical consciousness that shapes how nations act on the world stage.
He asks this fundamental question, right? How do different societies, with all their unique histories and cultures, define what order even means to them? And how do they go about trying to achieve it?
Exactly. And that question feels incredibly relevant today, doesn't it? You look at the news, conflicts, power shifts, it all comes back to differing ideas of order.
Totally. So what's Kissinger's first big point here?
Okay.
Is there one single world order?
Well, that's the fascinating thing. He argues pretty strongly that world order isn't some single, universally agreed upon blueprint. That's a common misconception.
Okay. So what is it then?
He sees it more as a collection of regional orders, often operating side by side, each with its own internal logic, its own history, its own operating principles.
Wow. So multiple orders, not just one.
Precisely. And the core challenge for any international system, as he lays it out, is finding this really subtle and crucially sustainable balance between three things: restraint, force, and legitimacy.
Restraint, force, legitimacy. Okay. Break those down a bit.
Sure. Restraint is about self-control, not pushing too far. Force is, well, the capacity to compel military power, economic leverage, that sort of thing. And legitimacy is the crucial one, maybe the trickiest.
Legitimacy. What does he mean by that exactly? Is it about being morally right?
Not necessarily in an absolute moral sense, though that can play a part. For Kissinger, legitimacy is more about the international acceptance of a system's basic framework. Is it seen as broadly fair? Do the major players agree, more or less, on the rules of the game? Is there a shared understanding of what constitutes a fair arrangement?
So it's about buy-in. People accepting the system even if they don't love every part of it.
Exactly. It's that perceived justice, that shared understanding. And power, of course, is the capacity to actually enforce that order, to uphold the rules.
Right.
And Kissinger's core argument is that a truly stable world order needs both legitimacy and power, and they need to be in some kind of equilibrium. If one is missing, or if they get wildly out of balance, the whole system is in danger.
Can you give an example of that?
Well, think about the collapse of the Soviet Union. For decades, it had immense power, military, political, but over time, it lost legitimacy, both internally and externally. The system wasn't seen as just or workable by enough people, and eventually, despite all that power, it crumbled. It really raises that question: can sheer power alone sustain an order forever if people don't believe in it?
Probably not, seems like. It's a powerful point. It really sets the stage. Okay, so let's use that framework of legitimacy and power and look at Europe. It gave us one of the most enduring concepts of order, the Westphalian system, but it came out of pure chaos.
Utter chaos. The Peace of Westphalia in 1648 ended the 30 Years' War. And you have to understand, this war was horrific. It devastated Central Europe, possibly killing millions through fighting, famine, disease.
Just unimaginable.
Absolutely. And Kissinger stresses that the Westphalian settlement didn't create some new shared moral order. It wasn't about everyone suddenly agreeing on values. It came about, he argues, from general exhaustion and cynicism.
So basically everyone was just too tired to keep fighting.
Pretty much. It was a pragmatic necessity. Let's just stop the bloodshed. And what it established were these foundational principles. Sovereign states, non-interference in each other's internal affairs, a radical idea then, and the notion of a balance of power to keep any one state from dominating.
And you mentioned it was procedural. What does that mean?
It means it focused on the methods of interaction, the rules of the road, rather than the substance of what states believed or how they governed themselves internally. It dealt with how power was allocated and managed, not whether a state was Catholic or Protestant, a monarchy, or something else.
So agree to disagree on internal stuff, but agree on how we interact externally.
That's the core idea. It accepted diversity, grudgingly perhaps, but it accepted it. States could coexist, respecting each other's sovereignty, maintaining a balance. It was a huge shift away from trying to impose a single religious or political truth on everyone.
And this system, born in Europe, it spread, didn't it?
It did. Over centuries, it became the dominant model for state-to-state relations globally. It's really the foundation of modern international law and diplomacy, even though it's constantly being challenged.
Okay, so Westphalia establishes this procedural order. But then Napoleon happens. He shatters that balance, right? Aims for continental domination.
He absolutely does. Napoleon's conquest completely overturned the Westphalian balance, so after his defeat, Europe had to pick up the pieces again. And that leads us to the Congress of Vienna, 1814-1815.
What was the goal there? Just put things back the way they were?
Not exactly. It was more ambitious in some ways. Kissinger describes it as maybe the closest Europe came to universal governance since Charlemagne, though obviously very different. The key statesmen there, Metternich from Austria, Castlereagh from Britain, Talleyrand from France, surprisingly, they aimed to restore equilibrium.
Equilibrium, like the balance of power again.
Yes, but with a crucial addition. They prioritized the preservation of the system itself above any single nation's immediate interests. The goal was to settle differences through consultation, through diplomacy, rather than resorting to war immediately. They learned a hard lesson from the Napoleonic Wars.
And you mentioned Talleyrand. Wasn't he seen as a bit of an opportunist, switching sides constantly?
He definitely was. Bishop, revolutionary, Napoleon's minister, then working for the restored monarchy. Kissinger uses him as a fascinating symbol of that era of massive upheaval, but his underlying goal, arguably, was always stability for France and peace for Europe. He was a master of understanding power and legitimacy in a constantly shifting landscape.
So pragmatism was key at Vienna.
Immense pragmatism. But there were challenges. Different leaders brought very different ideas. Tsar Alexander I of Russia, for instance, had this almost mystical vision of a holy alliance.
The Holy Alliance, what was that?
He wanted an order based on Christian principles, princes united in brotherhood, guided by religious precepts. It was sort of a forerunner to Wilsonian idealism, but based on monarchy and religion, not democracy. He actually declared there is now only one common policy, transcending national interests.
Wow, that sounds completely opposite to the Westphalian idea of balancing sovereign states.
Exactly. It was a direct challenge. Metternich and others were skeptical, focused more on the traditional balance of power. And you also had differing perspectives based on geography.
How so?
Britain, safe behind the English Channel, saw order mainly as preventing any single power from dominating the continent. They could tolerate more instability than, say, Austria or Prussia, who were right in the middle of things and felt much more vulnerable to shifts in power or domestic revolutions next door.
That makes sense. Different threat perceptions.
Definitely. And Vienna also produced some innovations. Later, in 1830, there was the London Conference that established Belgian neutrality.
Belgian neutrality, that sounds specific.
It was a heretofore unknown concept, Kissinger calls it. Belgium pledged not to join alliances, and the major powers guaranteed its neutrality. It was a collective security arrangement for a specific small state designed to act as a buffer. It showed the system could adapt.
So Vienna created this system that actually kept major wars off the continent for quite a while, right? Almost a century.
Largely, yes. There were regional conflicts, but no continent-wide inferno like the Napoleonic Wars or, tragically, what was to come.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting and kind of sad. This equilibrium, this careful balance established in Vienna,
Yeah.
it started to fray in the mid-19th century.
Yeah.
What were the cracks that appeared? What went wrong?
Kissinger points to a few key developments that destabilized the system. It wasn't one single event, more like a gradual erosion of the flexibility and the shared understanding that underpinned Vienna.
Okay, like...
Well, first, the explosive rise of nationalism. Fueled partly by Napoleon, it really took off with the 1848 revolutions across Europe. People started identifying more strongly with their ethnic or linguistic group than with their dynastic rulers. Demands for self-determination grew louder, challenging the multi-ethnic empires like Austria-Hungary.
So, identity politics starting to challenge the old order.
Precisely. Second, the Crimean War in the 1850s. It pitted Britain, France, and the Ottoman Empire against Russia. While it checked Russian expansion, it also shattered the cooperation between the great powers that had marked the post-Vienna era. It showed they were willing to fight each other again over geopolitical interests.
Right. The concert of Europe was breaking down.
But the most profound change, the real earthquake, was the unification of Germany under Otto von Bismarck.
Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor, he looms large, doesn't he?
Absolutely. He was a master strategist, but his methods fundamentally altered the European game. Before him, German unity was often linked with liberalism. Bismarck showed you could achieve unity through power politics, through realpolitik, without liberalism.
Realpolitik. Tell us more about that.
It's that policy based strictly on national interest and power calculations, devoid of sentiment or ideology. Bismarck famously said, "The only healthy basis of policy for a great power is egotism and not romanticism." He focused purely on the correct evaluation of the components of power.
Ruthlessly pragmatic, then.
Utterly. He used short, decisive wars against Denmark, Austria, and then, crucially, France, to forge a unified German empire under Prussian leadership.
And the consequences of that were huge.
Seismic. The Franco-Prussian War of 1870-71 was a crushing defeat for France. Germany annexed Alsace-Lorraine, demanded a huge indemnity, and this was incredibly provocative, proclaimed the German Empire in the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, the symbolic heart of French power.
Wow, that must have created lasting bitterness.
It absolutely did. It irrevocably estranged France and Germany. And with a powerful, unified Germany now at the center of Europe, the whole system lost its fluidity. It became rigid. Instead of flexible diplomacy, they got rigid alliance blocks. The Triple Alliance, Germany, Austria-Hungary, Italy, squared off against the Triple Entente, France, Russia, and eventually Britain. Every crisis now threatened to pull everyone in.
And Britain joined the Entente. I thought they liked splendid isolation.
They did for a long time. But German actions, particularly its naval buildup and assertive diplomacy trying to break the Entente by humiliating its members in crises over Morocco and Bosnia, actually pushed Britain closer to France and Russia. It backfired spectacularly.
So the alliances hardened, flexibility vanished.
Exactly. Kissinger argues World War I broke out because political leaders ultimately lost control over their own tactics. They were trapped in this system of routinized confrontation, backed by massive, modern military machines and rigid mobilization plans.
So the assassination of the Archduke.
An essentially parochial issue, as Kissinger puts it, became the spark that ignited the whole powder keg. The system designed to maintain peace ultimately led to its catastrophic destruction, obliterating a century of relative stability. A failure of statesmanship, really.
What an incredible and tragic story. Okay, let's shift gears completely now. We've talked about Europe's pluralistic state-based system. Now let's explore a fundamentally different concept of order, the one rooted in the Islamic world. How did that vision differ?
It's a profoundly different starting point. Early Islam, as Kissinger explains, viewed its expansion not just as empire building, but as a sacred obligation. There was this deep identity of religious and political power. Faith wasn't separate from the state, it was the state in many ways.
So a universal mission based on faith.
Exactly. The goal was ultimately to unite the world under Pax Islamica, a universal Islamic peace. Non-Muslim communities within this order would either convert or exist as tolerated, protected entities, dhimmis, or maintain relations through treaties if outside the core territory.
And this led to the concepts of Dar al-Islam and Dar al-Harb.
Yes. Dar al-Islam is the abode of Islam, where Islamic law prevails. Dar al-Harb is the abode of war, the regions not yet under Islamic rule. And jihad was seen as the obligation to expand the Dar al-Islam through various forms of struggle until it encompassed the world. It was a universalist vision aiming for one single faith-based order.
A very different worldview from Westphalia's acceptance of multiple sovereigns.
Completely different. And within this world, a major historical division occurred very early on, right after the Prophet Muhammad's death in 632. The Sunni-Shia split.
Tell us about that. It's still so relevant today.
It really is. The split was fundamentally about succession. Who should lead the Muslim community after the Prophet? Sunnis, the name comes from, people of tradition and consensus believe the community's elders should choose the caliph, the successor.
Okay, selection process.
Right. Shias, from Shi'at Ali, the party of Ali, believed leadership should pass automatically to the Prophet's closest male relative, his cousin and son-in-law, Ali, who they believed Muhammad had designated.
So, inherited spiritual authority versus community consensus.
That's a good way to put it. And this disagreement wasn't just political, it became deeply theological and spiritual as well. It created this lasting, profound split over legitimate authority that has shaped politics, culture, and conflict in the region ever since.
It's amazing how these ancient events still resonate.
Yeah.
So you have this universal Islamic vision. How did it interact with the Westphalian system, especially through a major power like the Ottoman Empire?
The Ottomans definitely saw themselves in that universalist tradition. The Sultan was the shadow of God on earth, the protector of the faithful, ruler of a vast empire. Initially, they were a major rival to European powers, expanding deep into the Balkans.
Eventually that changed.
It did. By the 19th century, due to internal challenges and the rise of European industrial and military power, the Ottoman Empire became known as the sick man of Europe. European powers started seeing it less as an evil player and more as a problem to be managed, a weight in their balance of power calculations, but not a co-designer of the system.
So sort of incorporated into the European system, but not really of it.
That's a good way to describe it. And you see this dual identity play out fascinatingly at the start of World War I.
How so?
The Ottoman Sultan issued statements using both Westphalian and Islamic justifications for entering the war. On one hand, he accused Russia of violating armed neutrality, a classic Westphalian legal argument. On the other hand, the chief religious official declared jihad, calling on all Muslims worldwide to fight against Britain, France, and Russia for annihilating Islam.
Wow. Using both playbooks at once.
Trying to leverage both systems. But after WWI, the Ottoman Empire was dismantled. The victorious European powers carved up its Middle Eastern territories into mandates like British Palestine, French Syria, and Lebanon.
And these mandates created new problems.
Big problems. They drew lines on maps that often ignored existing ethnic and sectarian realities, lumping different groups together in artificially created states. The mandate powers often ruled by playing these groups off against each other, and things like the Balfour Declaration in 1917 promising a Jewish national home in Palestine while vaguely safeguarding non-Jewish rights just added layers of ambiguity and future conflict.
So imposing a Westphalian structure onto a region with a totally different history and identity, recipe for instability.
Pretty much. It laid the groundwork for many of the conflicts and identity crises we still see playing out today.
Okay, let's fast forward into the 20th century. After WWII, how did these historical Islamic concepts of order resurface and start directly challenging the Westphalian system that had been, in many ways, imposed on the region?
Well, during the Cold War, many Middle Eastern states did operate within a largely Westphalian framework. They pursued national interests aligned with the U.S. or the Soviets based on strategic calculations. Anwar Sadat making peace with Israel in 1979 is a key example, a clear national interest decision.
Though it cost him his life.
Tragically, yes. Assassinated by Islamists who rejected that Westphalian compromise, and that points to the growing challenge. As secular Arab nationalist regimes started to falter economically and lose legitimacy, particularly from the 1970s onwards, this created a vacuum.
A vacuum that religious movements filled.
Exactly. Groups like the Muslim Brotherhood, founded way back in 1928 by Hassan al-Banna, gained traction. Al-Banna explicitly argued that the Western Westphalian order had failed the Muslim world, losing both legitimacy and power. He called for a return to original Islamic principles, a complete restoration.
A rejection of the Western model.
A fundamental rejection. And this thinking was radicalized further by figures like Said Qutb in Egypt. His ideas, once seen as extreme, became incredibly influential for later generations of jihadists.
Groups like Al-Qaeda, ISIS.
Yes, and Hamas, Hezbollah, the Taliban, Iran's revolutionary regime. They all draw, to varying degrees, on this radical interpretation. They reject national borders and loyalties as illegitimate divisions of the true Islamic community, the Ummah. Their goal isn't stability within the existing system. It's purity and the transformation of the Dar al-Harb into Dar al-Islam through jihad.
So a direct ideological assault on the Westphalian order.
Absolutely. And we saw this play out dramatically during the Arab Spring starting in 2010. The West initially hoped for liberal democracy.
Yeah, I remember that hope.
But the reality was that the existing organized forces, militaries, and well-established Islamist groups were better positioned to fill the power vacuum left by falling dictators. It often led to chaos, civil war like in Syria, or the rise of new forms of authoritarianism rather than stable democracies.
And the Israeli-Palestinian conflict fits into this clash of worldviews, too.
Kissinger argues it's a central example. You have Israel operating as a Westphalian nation-state based on sovereignty and international law. But for many in the region, its very existence is viewed through an Islamic consciousness as an illegitimate imposition. Trying to bridge that gap, as Sadat and Rabin tried to do through Westphalian peace deals, proved incredibly dangerous because it challenged those deeper conceptions of order.
It's a clash of fundamental frameworks. That leads us to the big regional players today, Iran and Saudi Arabia. Their rivalry seems central to everything in the Middle East. How does Kissinger analyze their roles and their competing visions?
They represent two very different and often conflicting approaches, embodying many of the tensions we've discussed. Let's take Saudi Arabia first.
Okay, the U.S. ally, but internally very different.
Exactly. It's a key Western partner, especially in energy and counterterrorism sometimes, but its internal system is based on a conservative monarchy fused with Wahhabism, arguably the most fundamentalist strain of Sunni Islam.
So a built-in tension there.
A huge tension. Historically, Saudi foreign policy was cautious, using ambiguity. But increasingly, its rivalry with Shiite Iran has become overt. Kissinger sees Saudi Arabia as torn. It needs the security and legitimacy of the Westphalian system, but its identity is rooted in this religious purism. And by promoting Wahhabism globally, partly to counter rivals, it has, Kissinger argues, inadvertently fueled some of the very jihadist movements that now threaten it and the West.
Wow, that's a dangerous paradox.
It is. And it fuels what Kissinger calls the two forms of civil war in the region. Westphalian states versus anti-state Islamists, and the sectarian Sunni-Shia conflict, largely represented by the Saudi-Iran rivalry.
And he mentions the nuclear issue regarding Saudi Arabia.
Yes, and it's chilling. He suggests that if Saudi Arabia perceives the U.S. security commitment is wavering, especially in the face of Iran's progress, it might feel compelled to pursue its own nuclear weapons. That could trigger a terrifying regional arms race.
Okay, now Iran. The 1979 revolution was a watershed moment, wasn't it?
Absolutely. It was the first time radical Islamist principles were implemented as state power in the modern era. What's fascinating about Iran is its dual nature. It's an ancient civilization, a historic state that operated within the Westphalian system for centuries.
Right. Persia has a long history.
Exactly. But the revolution transformed it into an advocate for radical Islam, viewing the state itself as primarily a weapon of convenience in a broader religious struggle. Supreme Leader Khamenei talks about a global Islamic awakening to vanquish U.S. influence and establish a new Islamic civilization.
So a revolutionary universalist mission again.
Yes, but combined with a very sophisticated ancient tradition of statecraft, what Kissinger calls endurance, shrewd analysis, and psychological manipulation of adversaries. They are patient and strategic, using both revolutionary zeal and pragmatic calculation.
Which brings us to their nuclear program. That's been a major point of contention for decades.
It has. And Kissinger details how Iran has consistently advanced its capabilities, often despite international pressure and UN resolutions. He notes a concerning trend where Western demands have progressively softened from demanding zero enrichment to now negotiating levels of enrichment.
So a de facto acceptance that they will enrich uranium.
That seems to be the trajectory, and the big worry isn't just Iran building a bomb, but becoming a virtual nuclear power.
Beaming.
Meaning they have all the pieces, the materials, the know-how, ready to assemble a weapon very quickly, perhaps in months if they decide to. That capability alone changes the strategic landscape.
Because other countries in the region would react.
Precisely. Turkey, Egypt, and especially Saudi Arabia might feel they need their own nuclear capability to counter Iran. That regional proliferation is the nightmare scenario, dramatically increasing the risk of conflict, potentially even preemptive strikes. It shows how a regional clash of orders could destabilize the global nuclear non-proliferation regime.
That's a sobering thought. Okay, let's shift continents now and look at Asia. Kissinger talks about a rebalancing of world order there. What's the general context for Asia's diverse approaches?
A key shared element across many Asian states is that post-colonial identity. There's a strong sense that after centuries of Western influence or direct dominance, the global order is shifting, and Asia is reclaiming its central role.
A return to historical prominence.
In a way, yes. And historically, many Asian systems of order were based more on hierarchy than on the Westphalian idea of equal sovereigns. Think of China's traditional view of itself at the center, with tributaries. Power was often shown through deference, through acknowledging a central authority rather than strictly defined borders.
So a different organizing principle.
Right. And this often leads Asian states today to pursue their national interests with a strong degree of independence, sometimes wary of being drawn into larger systems or alliances they see as remnants of a Western-dominated era. The focus is often on internal stability and national development first.
Let's look at Japan. Its journey is remarkable, from isolation to global power, and now, seemingly, redefining itself again.
Japan's story is fascinating. For centuries, it cultivated its unique identity in self-imposed isolation, seeing itself as a divine country. That changed dramatically in 1853 with Commodore Perry's Black Ships.
The forced opening.
Exactly. The sheer technological superiority of Perry's fleet forced Japan's leaders to realize resistance was futile. They had to adapt, and fast.
Which led to the Meiji Restoration.
Yes, in 1868. It was an incredibly rapid and systematic modernization industry, military infrastructure, but done while consciously trying to preserve Japan's unique cultural core. Western technology, Japanese spirit was a common slogan.
And it worked.
Remarkably well. Japan became the first non-Western nation to achieve great power status in the modern era. After WWI, it even tried to create its own regional order, an Asian bloc led by Japan, free from Western influence, though conceived hierarchically.
But then came World War II and defeat.
Right. Post-WWII, Japan adopted a pacifist constitution and strategically aligned itself very closely with the United States, focusing intensely on economic reconstruction and growth under the U.S. security umbrella.
But that's changing now.
It seems to be. With the rise of China and other regional shifts, Japan is increasingly talking about becoming a normal country again, meaning having a military without the same constitutional constraints and playing a more active role in regional security alliances. It's reassessing its place in the 21st century order.
Another major player is India. Kissinger calls it a civilization shaped at the intersection of world orders. What's unique about India's approach?
India's identity is incredibly complex. It's defined more by a shared cultural spectrum, especially Hinduism, than by sharp political borders or a single founding myth. Ancient Indian statecraft, like in Kautilya's Arthashastra from over 2,000 years ago, was remarkably pragmatic, even Machiavellian, focusing on state survival through power politics and strategic flexibility.
It is often a target for invaders.
For centuries, yes. Its wealth and location made it vulnerable. It was the British, ironically, who unified India administratively as a single unit, creating railways, a common administrative language, English, which inadvertently fostered a sense of modern Indian nationhood.
And then independence. Gandhi, Nehru.
Gandhi's passive resistance was brilliantly effective against British liberal values. Nehru, as the first prime minister, articulated India's foreign policy cornerstone: non-alignment.
Non-alignment, meaning staying out of the Cold War blocs.
Exactly. Kissinger describes it as a blend of righteous moralism with a shrewd assessment of the balance of forces. India didn't want to be a pawn in the superpower game. It measured success by avoiding entanglement in conflicts that didn't directly concern its interests. It wasn't about balancing power actively, but maintaining independence.
And contemporary India, how does it see its role?
It's asserted a special position in the Indian Ocean region, almost like a Monroe Doctrine for its neighborhood. It aims to prevent any single outside power from dominating that vast area. While it's managed internal diversity relatively well, it remains watchful of radicalization trends in the wider Muslim world. Kissinger sees India as absolutely crucial, a fulcrum of 21st century order.
A fulcrum. That's a strong statement. Now, China, perhaps the oldest continuous concept of order, all under heaven. How has China navigated its history and its reemergence as a major power?
China's traditional worldview, Tianxia, was unique. It saw itself as the center of civilization, the only truly civilized entity, with everyone else being tributaries in concentric circles. Diplomacy wasn't between equals. It was about others showing deference to the emperor.
Which clashed spectacularly with European ideas of diplomacy.
Absolutely. The refusal to treat British envoys as equals without the kowtow, the Opium Wars. China was forced, through military defeat in the 19th century, to engage reluctantly with the Westphalian system it saw as barbarian, a deeply humiliating experience that still shapes attitudes today.
Then came Mao. How did he fit into this?
Mao sought a new order, echoing the classical idea of great harmony, but through revolutionary destruction of the old ways. He believed China's unique moral authority, now communist, would again command global respect, even when China was materially weak. Kissinger thinks Mao's decision to enter the Korean War might have been his biggest strategic error, hardening U.S. commitment to Taiwan and delaying reunification.
And then the big shift. Nixon goes to China in 71.
A pivotal moment. Nixon, the staunch anti-communist, prioritized geopolitics over ideology. He needed China to balance the Soviet Union. His key principle was dealing with countries as they are, a major break from idealistic American foreign policy, pure realpolitik.
So where does that leave China today? Inheritor of Tianxia and a modern superpower.
It's exactly that duality. It's deeply proud of its ancient civilization and feels its centrality is being restored, yet it operates as a powerful Westphalian state. Kissinger notes its ambivalence towards international rules it didn't create. There is often a sense that the rules of the game were written by the West when China was weak.
So a potential clash there.
A major point of tension. Kissinger concludes the U.S. and China are now indispensable pillars of world order. The future depends on finding a way to manage both competition and cooperation, a balance of power strategy combined with partnership diplomacy. Avoiding confrontation requires both sides to understand the other's historical perspective and core interests.
That U.S.-China relationship seems key. Let's focus now on the United States itself. Kissinger describes it as an ambivalent superpower. What's the source of that ambivalence?
It stems from a core tension baked into American identity from the start. The U.S. was founded on the idea of freedom, seeing itself as exceptional, an empire for liberty, acting not just for itself but for all mankind.
American exceptionalism.
Exactly. This created a kind of missionary zeal in its foreign policy, the belief that American values, democracy, liberty, are universal, and that the U.S. has a duty to promote them. Tocqueville noted this unique blend of the spirit of religion and the spirit of freedom. It also fostered a distrust of old-world power politics and hierarchies.
And manifest destiny. How did that fit in?
Early expansion across the continent, the Monroe Doctrine claiming the Western Hemisphere as its sphere. These were often framed not as imperialism in the European sense, but as spreading liberty, a natural unfolding, almost a law of nature. It was justified morally, acting on behalf of humanity as they saw it. This moral dimension makes purely pragmatic power politics sometimes awkward for the U.S.
So this unique outlook shaped its rise to global leadership. How did that play out in practice? We saw different presidents with very different ideas.
Yes, two main strands emerged, constantly competing. Theodore Roosevelt represented the geopolitical approach. He saw the U.S. needing to play a global role similar to Britain's in the 19th century, maintaining equilibrium, using power decisively, being the offshore balancer for Eurasia.
A realist, then.
Very much so. He was impatient with idealism detached from power. He thought international law needed force behind it and called disarmament an illusion. He believed free societies often underestimated threats and needed to stay strong.
But then Woodrow Wilson offered a completely different vision.
A profoundly different vision, and arguably one with a more lasting grip on the American imagination. Wilson took America into WWI not to restore a balance of power, but famously to make the world safe for democracy.
He rejected the balance of power.
He denounced it. He advocated for collective security through the League of Nations, believing democratic states were inherently peaceful and conflict came from autocrats and secret deals. His vision was about transforming the international system based on universal principles.
So TR the realist, Wilson the idealist.
Yeah.
Those two poles seem to define a lot of U.S. foreign policy debates since.
They really do. That tension runs throughout the 20th century and right up to today.
Okay, let's look at the Cold War then. That must have tested these principles intensely against a powerful ideological rival.
It absolutely did. Truman's containment policy was a blend. It created NATO, an alliance based on shared values, idealism, but designed to counter Soviet power, realism. The Korean War was fought under the UN banner, collective security, but ended in a negotiated stalemate, renouncing total victory, a pragmatic choice in the nuclear age.
But Vietnam challenged containment, didn't it?
Profoundly. Applying containment in a complex, post-colonial, asymmetric conflict proved disastrous. It led to huge domestic division, shattered American self-confidence, and forced a painful reassessment of America's role and the limits of its power and ideals.
And Nixon came in during that period of division.
Right. Nixon, mentored in some ways by Kissinger himself, leaned heavily towards realism. The opening to China was the prime example, prioritizing geopolitical balance over ideology. He stressed the need for American strength and a willingness to act globally, but within a framework that recognized limits and integrated power with legitimacy more pragmatically.
Then the Cold War ends. A victory for which side of the debate?
It's complicated. Reagan used strong, idealistic rhetoric, evil empire, shining city on a hill, but also engaged in pragmatic diplomacy and exploited Soviet weaknesses. George H.W. Bush spoke of a new world order, echoing Wilsonian ideals of collective security and the rule of law, hoping the UN could finally function as intended.
But then came 9/11 and the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Another swing of the pendulum.
In many ways, yes. The response to jihadist extremism involved another major push to spread freedom and democracy, particularly in the Middle East. But Kissinger notes the immense difficulty in reconciling noble purpose with practical possibility in such complex regions. The results were often counterproductive, leading to more instability.
So Kissinger sees this recurring pattern.
Yes, this oscillation between extremes of overexpansion and disillusioned withdrawal. A constant struggle within the American psyche between its idealistic impulses and the realities of power politics, between seeking legitimacy through values and ensuring security through strength. That ambivalence continues.
That brings us right up to the modern challenges, and technology is a huge one. Let's start with nuclear weapons. How did they fundamentally change the concept of order?
They changed everything. Kissinger says they brought humanity to the edge of mutual suicide and made deterrence, the threat of unacceptable retaliation, the ultimate basis of order between the superpowers.
And that worked during the Cold War. Mostly.
Mostly, yes, because it was primarily a bipolar standoff. Both the U.S. and USSR had vast arsenals and, despite tensions, a shared understanding of the catastrophic consequences. Restraint, however grudging, generally prevailed, though moments like the Cuban Missile Crisis showed how thin the ice was.
But proliferation changes that calculation. More countries getting the bomb.
Completely. As nuclear weapons spread, especially to potentially less stable states or even non-state actors, though that's harder, the logic of deterrence becomes much more fragile, ephemeral, and unreliable, as Kissinger puts it. Who is deterring whom? Are their calculations rational? The risk of miscalculation or accidental use goes way up.
And efforts to stop proliferation, like the NPT treaty, are struggling.
They face huge challenges. The regime is often criticized as nuclear apartheid by non-nuclear states who see the established powers keeping their weapons while telling others they can't have them. Countries like North Korea just walk away. Iran pushes the boundaries. It's getting harder to hold the line.
And Iran becoming a virtual nuclear power is a key concern.
Yes, that threshold capability, being able to build a weapon quickly, is almost as destabilizing as actually having one because it forces neighbors to react, potentially starting that regional arms race we talked about. Technology is outstripping diplomacy here.
If nuclear weapons were one technological revolution, cyber is surely another. How does Kissinger see cyber technology impacting world order? It seems even harder to grasp than nuclear strategy.
It is, in many ways, because it's newer, less understood, and operates in a completely different domain. The sheer speed of change in computing Moore's law, the Internet of Things connecting everything, has created this new realm, cyberspace, that traditional military and diplomatic doctrines are still struggling to catch up with.
Capabilities without clear rules.
Exactly. We have tools for cyber warfare, espionage, disruption, but no globally agreed upon norms for their use or even common interpretations of what constitutes an attack. State authority itself becomes blurry when non-state actors, or actors pretending to be non-state actors, can inflict massive damage remotely and often anonymously.
Which makes deterrence incredibly difficult, right? How do you retaliate proportionally?
That's the core problem. Nuclear deterrence relies on the threat of symmetrical, catastrophic retaliation. But if a cyber attack cripples a financial system, what's the equivalent cyber response in kind? Often there isn't one that's truly comparable or effective as a deterrent.
So it raises the question of kinetic response, using traditional military force.
It inevitably does. Does a massive cyber attack warrant a physical military response? If so, under what conditions? What's the threshold? We urgently need new theories of cyber deterrence and international norms, but we're way behind the curve. The risk of miscalculation leading to unintended escalation is very, very real.
It's dizzying. All this technology, all this information. What does it mean for actual human decision-making, for leadership? Are we getting smarter or just overwhelmed?
That's the million-dollar question, and Kissinger ends the book on this reflective, almost cautionary note. He quotes T.S. Eliot, Where is the wisdom we have lost in knowledge? Where's the knowledge we have lost in information?
Meaning the internet gives us information overload, but not necessarily understanding.
Precisely. The internet is brilliant at delivering information instantly and endlessly, but it can actually hinder the deeper reflection needed for knowledge and make wisdom, the ability to apply knowledge judiciously with foresight and historical context, seem almost unattainable.
And we pay for free information with our data.
Right. We supply data that's used to shape what we see next, potentially reinforcing biases, creating filter bubbles, rather than broadening our understanding.
How does this impact leaders?
Kissinger worries that the constant demand for transparency and connectivity, the 24/7 news cycle, the pressure of social media, it can inhibit the development of leaders with the strength to make difficult, lonely decisions. Decisions that require long-term vision, not just short-term popular approval.
Policymaking becomes reactive, driven by headlines.
It risks becoming, as he puts it, a subdivision of domestic politics, focused on managing perceptions rather than shaping the future. And constant connectivity can actually fuel confrontation by bringing conflicting value systems into immediate raw contact, making thoughtful dialogue harder.
So what's the solution? More wisdom.
Essentially, yes. He argues society needs to adapt education to foster a deeper understanding of history, geography, and philosophy, the things that cultivate context and judgment, not just technical skills or information retrieval. True leadership requires that deeper foundation to navigate the complexities ahead.
Wow. What an incredible sweeping journey through history, philosophy, and geopolitics in world order. We've really covered a lot of ground exploring how different civilizations have tackled these fundamental questions of legitimacy and power.
It really is a remarkable synthesis, and the core takeaway, I think, is that there's no single magic formula for world order. It's always been contested, always evolving.
The big challenge seems to be reconciling universal ideals, like those often championed by the U.S., with the reality of diverse histories and cultures around the world. How do you respect both?
That's the crux of it. Kissinger suggests we need to develop a kind of second culture, one that's global, structural, juridical, a framework that allows different regional orders and perspectives to coexist and cooperate on shared challenges without demanding total uniformity, finding that balance between the universal and the particular.
And Kissinger closes with that striking quote from the ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus.
Yeah, Heraclitus saw the world order as being like fire, constantly changing, kindling in measure and going out in measure, with war as the father and king of all. A pretty stark view.
But he also said the unity lies beneath the surface, in a balanced reaction between opposites.
Exactly, and that leaves us with the final provocative question for today. Can humanity find that equilibrium? Can we restrain the dogs of war, manage our differences, navigate technological disruption, and build a stable order based on that balanced reaction between opposites?
Can we find the wisdom and foresight to act before historical forces or technological changes engulf us?
That's the challenge Kissinger leaves us with. It requires constant effort, understanding, and skillful statesmanship.
A profound thought to end on. We really hope this deep dive has given you valuable insights into Kissinger's thinking and maybe sparked your curiosity to explore world order further yourself.
Thank you so much for joining us on Deep Dive English. We hope it was useful.